President Biden is in Illinois today to emphasize the importance of supporting farmers, as inflation continues to be one of the biggest, if not the current biggest challenge of his presidency. The president has pointed to Russia's war in Ukraine as at least one of the sources of the ongoing inflation problem felt across the nation. The price of goods and services in the U.S. is up 8.3% from 1 year ago. There's been a slight ease in inflation since March's peak, but it remains higher than many months ago experts predicted it would be. CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe is following the president's trip. You can see the beautiful Chicago skyline right behind him. Ed, what is on the agenda today for the president?
Major, good to see you from the Windy City. You could say this visit to Illinois is about three I's: inflation, infrastructure, and investment. Inflation first. He was out in rural Illinois visiting a farm earlier today to talk about the forthcoming spikes in food, in costs for farmers across the country, the potential food or wheat shortage around the world driven by the war in Ukraine. All of this a nod to the nation's farmers as they enter what is expected to be a busy but expensive summer, and part of the president's ongoing push to put emphasis on inflation, what he now calls his top matter of economic concern. Speaking about infrastructure, by visiting the IBEW convention, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, a big union that supported his campaign. He is, of course, someone who likes to say he's a labor union president, talking to people who are going to be at the center of implementing the infrastructure bill that was passed last year by building out the infrastructure that's going to be constructed in this country over the next several years. And then he's raising some coin with fundraisers who are investing in the Democratic Party. We're not quite sure exactly how much he's raising, but if he's in Chicago, it could very well be a healthy seven-figure. We'll see.
Speaking of fundraisers, you also caught up with Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, himself a pretty prolific fundraiser for Democrats, and you had a conversation about the future of abortion rights.
That's right, because Illinois is now, in essence, surrounded by 5 states that are set to restrict or completely end access to abortion procedures should Roe v. Wade be struck down as is now anticipated. So we talked to the governor a little bit about that and how the Democratic Party is responding to what may be coming from the Supreme Court. Take a listen.
Well, Illinois is an island that protects women's rights, women's reproductive rights. We're proud to be that island, but we're sorry that so many states in the Midwest either already have restricted abortion rights or are set to do so if that draft of the opinion on Roe v. Wade becomes law. So we're working very hard to expand our availability of services for people across the nation that may need them, may need to come to Illinois. But unfortunately, women are having to travel hundreds of miles and may not have the resources to do so. And we're trying to provide logistics help, place to stay, anything we can do to help them exercise their reproductive rights.
You're doing what you can here as a Democratic governor in a predominantly Democratic state. Is the president doing enough to raise awareness or concern about what's at stake here?
More is always better. Certainly the vice president's speech about the overturning of Roe v. Wade, very important as a launching point. We need more, and it's very important that we remind people that their rights are being taken away. They may not know it today, and they need to know that, and they need to activate and make sure that they get out and vote. The United States Senate is at risk here. We've got a 50-50 Senate. We do not even have 50% of the Senate that's pro-choice right now. So we've got to elect at least a couple more senators to make sure that we ensure women's rights.
So even if he doesn't do it before the court rules, you're saying the president needs to be more vocal about it once that ruling comes through, if it comes through as people now believe it will.
The president has spoken out on this issue, there's no doubt about it, but I think it needs to be a drumbeat. We need to be talking about this, making sure that voters know about this from now through November, and frankly, as long as it takes.
One other thing we know the governor talked to the president about is Illinois' status in 2024. It's one of several states that have submitted bids to be an early primary state. He argues that between Chicagoland and the rural farmland to the south, this is exactly the kind of state that a Democratic presidential candidate should have to come through and try to win. The other thing he's talking to the president about is hosting the 2024 Democratic National Convention in this city. He says it's been a while, since 1996, that Democrats have done it here, and they should do it again in 2 years, Major.
And before we let you go, we have just learned that President Biden will permit the release of additional records from the Trump administration related to January 6th. What can you tell us?
Yeah, it's unclear what exactly is in what will be the 8th batch of documents handed over from the National Archives to the House Select Committee that continues to investigate the attacks on January 6th. But it's consistent with what the Archives has done previously, which is the president has waived executive privilege in this case, is not protecting former President Trump in this regard, despite the former president's attempts to hold back all sorts of documents ranging from visitors' logs, phone logs, and other notes that were taken in the days leading up to and after January 6th. But it is a signal that the committee continues to do its work in anticipation of public hearings in the coming weeks, and of course in anticipation of November's elections, which may very quickly wrap up the work of that select committee. We'll see.
Traveling with the president in Chicago, Ed O'Keefe. Thanks very much.
Take care.